The most dangerous place for justice is not inside a courtroom. It is inside a mind that has already reached a conclusion. Saturday morning sunlight poured through the enormous front windows of one of the busiest supermarkets in Northern Virginia, reflecting across polished tile floors where shopping carts rolled steadily between checkout lanes. Families compared grocery lists, children pointed excitedly toward colorful displays, and employees stocked fresh produce while soft music played overhead. It looked like an ordinary weekend morning, the kind where strangers crossed paths without ever imagining their lives might briefly intersect. Yet among hundreds of shoppers moving through the aisles, one quiet encounter was already beginning to reshape the entire day. Officer Ryan Walker had stopped at the supermarket while finishing a routine patrol near the shopping center. Wearing a neatly pressed navy police uniform with his silver badge catching the morning light, he casually observed the growing weekend crowd with the confidence that years of experience had given him. He often believed he could recognize suspicious behavior before anyone else noticed it. That confidence had quietly become instinct, and instinct had gradually become certainty. As customers continued filling carts with groceries, his attention settled on a black woman walking alone through the checkout area carrying only a small shopping basket. She wore a tailored charcoal business suit, polished black heels, and carried a simple leather handbag over one shoulder. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or public attention. No security detail followed behind her. No official vehicle waited outside. No assistants accompanied her. She thanked a cashier with a warm smile after purchasing a few ordinary household items before calmly walking toward the exit. Her name was Victoria Hayes, although no one inside the supermarket appeared to recognize her. Ryan stepped directly into her path before she reached the automatic doors. "Ma'am, I need you to stop for a moment," he said firmly. Victoria immediately complied and looked toward him with calm brown eyes. "Good morning, officer," she replied politely. "How may I help you?" Her voice remained steady and respectful, somehow making Ryan even more suspicious. He carefully studied her expression before answering. "I need to ask you a few questions before you leave." Victoria nodded without hesitation. "Of course." She slowly reached toward her handbag, intending to retrieve identification. Before she could open it, Ryan lifted one hand. "Please leave your bag where it is." Victoria immediately lowered her hand. "Certainly," she answered. "If you allow me a moment, I can explain why I am here." Ryan interrupted before she finished speaking. "You can explain after I determine whether everything checks out." Several nearby shoppers slowed their pace. A young father pushing a shopping cart quietly stopped beside the checkout lanes while two grocery employees exchanged uncertain glances from behind a register. One customer instinctively lifted a phone, pointing the camera toward the growing conversation without saying a word. Public moments have a way of creating silent audiences before anyone fully understands why. Victoria remained remarkably composed. She neither protested nor demanded special treatment. She simply stood where she had been instructed, her expression unchanged despite the growing attention surrounding her. Ryan interpreted that calmness as confidence that had not yet been earned. "People cannot simply expect everyone to believe whatever story they tell," he said. Victoria met his eyes with quiet sincerity. "Officer, every person deserves the opportunity to be heard before a conclusion is reached." Her words carried no frustration, no anger, and no attempt to challenge his authority. Believing he was acting appropriately, Ryan informed Victoria that she would be placed under arrest while her identity and the situation were verified. She complied peacefully with every lawful instruction, offering no resistance and asking for no special consideration. Around them, conversations gradually faded as more shoppers turned toward the unusual scene. Some quietly reached for their phones. Others simply watched in complete silence. Victoria never revealed who she was. She never mentioned the important schedule waiting beyond the supermarket doors. She only glanced once toward the bright morning sunlight outside with calm patience, as though she understood that truth had never needed to hurry because eventually it always arrived exactly where justice expected it to be. Victoria Hayes remained exactly where Officer Ryan Walker had instructed her to stand, her leather handbag resting quietly beside the grocery bags that contained nothing more remarkable than fresh fruit, bread, bottled water, and a carton of milk. Around them, the supermarket continued moving with the familiar rhythm of a busy Saturday morning. Cash registers chimed steadily as shoppers completed purchases, employees stocked shelves with practiced efficiency, shopping carts rolled across polished floors, and overhead announcements welcomed customers to weekend specials. To everyone passing through the front checkout area, Victoria appeared to be another customer unexpectedly delayed before leaving the store. She made no effort to change that impression. Instead, she quietly observed the entrance doors where sunlight poured across the floor, her expression remaining calm despite the growing attention surrounding her. Officer Ryan Walker became increasingly convinced that every passing minute confirmed the judgment he had already reached. The more patient Victoria appeared, the more certain he became that she was concealing something important. In his experience, innocent shoppers usually rushed to explain themselves. Some became nervous. Others insisted on proving who they were immediately. Victoria did none of those things. Her quiet composure somehow strengthened his assumptions instead of challenging them. "You have been unusually calm," Ryan finally remarked. Victoria looked toward him with the same respectful expression she had maintained since the beginning of the encounter. "Remaining calm usually gives everyone a better opportunity to understand the truth," she answered softly. Ryan folded his arms. "Good decisions begin with following instructions." Victoria nodded immediately. "I agree completely." There was no sarcasm in her voice. No frustration. Only quiet dignity. Nearby, a cashier paused while placing groceries into reusable bags before returning to work. A produce clerk slowed briefly while pushing a cart of fresh vegetables toward another aisle. Two shoppers waiting near the self-checkout stations quietly exchanged uncertain glances while another customer discreetly continued recording the scene with a mobile phone held at waist level. Public moments often gathered silent witnesses before anyone realized they were watching something extraordinary. Several miles away, inside a secure federal coordination office, concern had already begun spreading among officials responsible for a carefully planned schedule. A government transportation coordinator reviewed arrival reports while a Supreme Court liaison checked messages that remained unanswered. One entry on the day's itinerary remained highlighted because an expected arrival had not yet been confirmed. "Has Justice Brooks checked in?" the liaison quietly asked. Another official slowly shook his head. "Transportation records confirm she stopped at the supermarket before continuing to Washington, but she has not resumed the scheduled route." The room became noticeably quieter. U.S. Marshal Sarah Bennett immediately requested nearby surveillance from the shopping center. Large security monitors displayed different camera angles covering the parking lot, store entrance, and checkout area. One image repeatedly showed a woman in a charcoal business suit standing calmly near the front of the supermarket while a uniformed officer remained nearby. The camera angle remained distant, but something about the posture, the leather handbag, and the unmistakable composure felt immediately familiar. Sarah enlarged the image without speaking. The picture sharpened just enough for recognition to replace uncertainty. She quietly lowered the tablet before looking toward the operations team. "I believe I know exactly where she is." Without another moment of hesitation, she turned toward the exit accompanied by several federal security officers. Back inside the supermarket, Ryan received a routine radio message requesting officers remain alert because federal officials were searching for an important government traveler whose schedule had unexpectedly stopped. He acknowledged the transmission without connecting it to the woman quietly standing before him. To Ryan, the search belonged to someone else entirely. Victoria briefly looked toward the front windows before softly saying, "Officer, sometimes the truth arrives quietly while everyone is searching somewhere else." Ryan remained silent because he believed he already understood everything necessary to complete his assignment. Only a short distance away, U.S. Marshal Sarah Bennett stepped from an unmarked federal vehicle into the supermarket parking lot, and with every step she took toward the entrance, the distance between assumption and truth quietly disappeared. Officer Ryan Walker had spent enough years wearing a badge to believe that experience allowed him to recognize trouble before it revealed itself. Every routine call that ended without incident quietly reinforced that confidence until confidence slowly became certainty. Standing beside the supermarket checkout lanes beneath bright fluorescent lights, he watched Victoria Hayes with growing suspicion simply because she refused to become emotional. Most people in similar situations protested immediately. Some insisted on explaining themselves. Others demanded to speak with supervisors. Victoria did none of those things. She remained composed, her grocery bags resting neatly beside her while weekend shoppers continued moving through the aisles only a few feet away. Her calm demeanor somehow convinced Ryan that she was hiding something rather than simply remaining patient. "You still have not explained why you were in such a hurry," he finally said. Victoria looked toward him with steady brown eyes before answering. "I offered to explain when we first spoke." Ryan replied immediately. "I will decide when explanations become necessary." Victoria acknowledged the statement with a respectful nod. "Very well." There was no frustration in her voice. Only quiet discipline. Nearby, a cashier carefully scanned another customer's groceries while pretending not to watch the unfolding scene. A father pushing a shopping cart slowed beside the bakery section before continuing forward with his children. Two supermarket employees quietly exchanged uncertain glances near the customer service counter. A shopper standing beside the magazine display discreetly continued recording with a mobile phone held low against a shopping basket. Around them, ordinary life continued, yet the atmosphere surrounding the front entrance grew noticeably quieter. Several miles away, inside the Federal Transportation Coordination Office, concern continued spreading. U.S. Marshal Sarah Bennett stood beside a conference table reviewing another update from the operations team. The secure itinerary remained highlighted because one scheduled movement had unexpectedly stopped. "Has anyone confirmed her location?" she asked. A transportation specialist checked another report before answering. Her vehicle reached the shopping center on schedule. After that, there has been no confirmed departure. Sarah immediately requested additional surveillance from surrounding businesses. Large security monitors displayed parking lot cameras, entrance cameras, and interior supermarket footage from multiple angles. One enlarged image repeatedly showed a woman wearing a charcoal business suit calmly standing near the checkout area while a uniformed officer remained nearby. Sarah quietly leaned closer to the screen. The posture, the leather handbag, and the unmistakable composure were instantly familiar. She slowly looked toward the operations director. "That is Justice Hayes." Without another second of hesitation, Sarah gathered several federal security officers and left the coordination center. Back inside the supermarket, Ryan received another routine radio transmission requesting all nearby units remain alert because federal officials were searching for an important government traveler whose schedule had unexpectedly stopped. He acknowledged the message with complete confidence. To him, the search involved someone entirely different from the woman quietly standing before him. Victoria briefly looked toward the automatic entrance doors where shoppers continued entering beneath bright morning sunlight before speaking once more. "Officer, every important decision deserves enough time for the facts to arrive." Ryan answered without hesitation. "Public safety depends on making decisions quickly." Victoria offered a faint, gentle smile. "The strongest decisions are both timely and careful." Ryan remained silent because he believed he already understood everything necessary to complete his assignment. Outside the supermarket, an unmarked federal vehicle quietly entered the parking lot. U.S. Marshal Sarah Bennett stepped out, accompanied by several federal officers, and immediately walked toward the entrance with calm determination. Inside the store, no one yet realized that every step bringing them closer also carried the truth that would soon silence the entire checkout area. U.S. Marshal Sarah Bennett entered the supermarket with calm determination, accompanied by several federal security officers and store manager Daniel Cooper, whose expression reflected growing concern rather than confusion. Around them, shopping carts slowed across polished tile floors, checkout scanners continued beeping in steady rhythm, and customers instinctively stepped aside as the small group moved directly toward the front checkout area. Officer Ryan Walker immediately straightened his posture, convinced the arriving officials were responding to the security situation he believed he had handled correctly. He glanced briefly toward Victoria Hayes before addressing the approaching Marshal. "Marshal Bennett," he began confidently, "this individual was detained while I verified her identity after observing behavior that required additional review." Sarah listened carefully without interrupting a single word. When Ryan finished speaking, she looked past him toward Victoria, and the concern that had filled her face throughout the morning disappeared immediately. She stepped forward with unmistakable respect. "Good morning, Justice Hayes," she said warmly. "We have been searching everywhere for you. The entire federal schedule has been waiting for your arrival." Those words settled across the supermarket in complete silence. Store manager Daniel Cooper quietly released a slow breath before adding, "Your Honor, federal transportation has been calling continuously." Everyone believed something unexpected had happened. Victoria acknowledged both of them with the same composed smile she had carried since entering the store. "I appreciate everyone's patience," she replied gently. "It appears this morning has reminded us all that patience is sometimes the first step toward understanding." Ryan felt every assumption he had made begin to collapse beneath the weight of a single sentence. The woman he had quietly judged, detained, and prevented from leaving the supermarket was not simply another customer completing weekend shopping. She was a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States whose official schedule had quietly brought multiple federal agencies together in search of her. Around them, whispers spread through the checkout area. Cashiers briefly stopped scanning groceries. Customers lowered their shopping baskets while exchanging astonished glances. Several people quietly lowered the phones they had been using to record, realizing they had witnessed something far greater than an ordinary misunderstanding. Sarah Bennett turned toward Ryan with complete professionalism. "Officer Walker," she said calmly, "Justice Hayes has always preferred traveling without unnecessary ceremony whenever possible. She believes every citizen should experience public life the same way everyone else does." Ryan slowly removed his patrol cap, his voice noticeably quieter than before. "Your Honor, I sincerely apologize." Victoria looked directly at him with steady kindness. "Thank you, officer." She paused briefly before continuing. "An apology becomes meaningful when it shapes tomorrow's decisions instead of yesterday's explanations." No one interrupted. Even the constant sounds of shopping carts and checkout scanners somehow seemed quieter as those simple words settled over everyone present. There was no anger in her voice. No attempt to embarrass anyone standing nearby. Only quiet dignity. Daniel Cooper respectfully returned Victoria's grocery bags exactly as they had been when she first entered the store. She accepted them with a grateful nod before turning once more toward Ryan. "Every person who walks into a supermarket deserves the confidence that they will be treated fairly before assumptions decide who they are," she said softly. Ryan met her eyes. "I understand that now." Victoria smiled warmly. "Then today has already accomplished something worthwhile." Sarah quietly signaled toward the waiting federal vehicles outside the entrance. "Your Honor, transportation is ready whenever you are." Victoria thanked her and calmly walked toward the automatic doors. Customers instinctively stepped aside with quiet respect as sunlight streamed through the glass entrance. Ryan remained standing beside the checkout lanes, silently watching the woman he had underestimated leave the store with the same quiet composure she had carried from the very beginning, finally realizing that true authority had never needed to announce itself because genuine character had already spoken long before anyone recognized the title it carried. Later that afternoon, after Justice Victoria Hayes had safely continued her official schedule, the events inside the supermarket quietly shifted from public attention to professional responsibility. Store manager Daniel Cooper preserved every security recording from the checkout area before any routine footage could be overwritten. Camera angles from the entrance, grocery aisles, self-checkout stations, customer service counters, and front registers were secured according to standard procedure. Officer Ryan Walker was requested to attend a formal administrative review inside the Regional Public Safety Office, where Captain Michael Donovan, representatives from local law enforcement, federal liaisons, and supermarket security managers gathered around a long conference table. The atmosphere remained calm, organized, and entirely professional. No one entered the room expecting humiliation. Everyone entered expecting truth. Captain Donovan looked around the room before speaking. Our responsibility today is not to defend assumptions. It is to understand decisions. The first recording appeared on the large display screen. It showed Justice Hayes calmly selecting groceries, thanking a store employee who helped another customer reach an item on a high shelf, waiting patiently at the checkout register, and cooperating immediately when Officer Walker approached her. Another camera confirmed the same sequence from a different angle. A third recording showed that she never attempted to leave, never argued, and never refused any lawful instruction. Every recording quietly repeated the same story from a different perspective. The room remained completely silent until the final image faded from the screen. Captain Donovan turned toward the officers seated around the table. What do the facts tell us? One supervisor answered quietly. She cooperated completely from beginning to end. Another added, nothing in her behavior suggested hostility, resistance, or urgency. Ryan continued looking at the frozen image displayed across the screen where Justice Hayes stood patiently beside her grocery bags with remarkable composure. For the first time, he was no longer remembering the encounter through the confidence of his own assumptions. He was seeing it exactly as it had happened. Captain Donovan then addressed him directly. Officer Walker, after reviewing every recording, what stands out to you most? Ryan took a slow breath before answering. Justice Hayes never gave me a reason to question her character. I allowed my first impression to become my final conclusion before I truly observed her actions. No one interrupted him. The honesty of the admission required no further explanation. Later that afternoon, U.S. Marshal Sarah Bennett informed Ryan that Justice Hayes had agreed to a brief meeting before continuing the remainder of her official schedule. The meeting took place inside a quiet federal conference room where Justice Hayes entered carrying the same leather handbag and wearing the same composed expression she had maintained throughout the entire day. Ryan spoke first. Your Honor, I want to apologize again. I understand now that every person deserves fairness before assumptions. Justice Hayes acknowledged his words with a gentle nod. Thank you, officer. An apology becomes meaningful when it improves tomorrow's decisions instead of explaining yesterday's. She paused briefly before continuing. Every public place welcomes people whose stories remain invisible. Titles should never become the reason someone receives dignity. Dignity should already be present before any title is known. The room remained silent as those words settled over everyone present. Captain Donovan confirmed that additional instruction focusing on communication, observation, impartial judgment, and respectful public interaction would become part of future officer training. Justice Hayes smiled warmly. Strengthening the process will always matter more than protecting pride. Before leaving, she looked once more toward Ryan. Public trust grows quietly, one respectful encounter at a time. Protect that, and you protect far more than a single store. As the conference room door gently closed behind her, everyone present understood that the most important lesson of the day had never been delivered from a courtroom bench. It had been demonstrated between supermarket aisles by someone whose character revealed the true meaning of justice long before anyone recognized the extraordinary office she quietly carried every day. Months gradually passed, and the lesson born between the supermarket checkout lanes quietly became something far greater than an administrative report filed inside a government office. Captain Michael Donovan worked with local leadership to introduce updated training sessions for every officer assigned to community patrol, emphasizing communication, observation, impartial judgment, and the importance of allowing facts to develop before conclusions were reached. During each session, a single sentence appeared on the presentation screen before any policy manuals were opened. Every person deserves dignity before their identity is known. The room would remain silent as those words settled over officers beginning another day of public service. Officer Ryan Walker attended every session without complaint because he no longer viewed that difficult morning as an isolated mistake. He understood it as a permanent reminder that confidence without reflection could quietly become its own blind spot. During one training discussion, a newly hired officer asked how someone could balance quick decision-making with patience. Ryan answered without hesitation. Public safety becomes stronger when people know they will be heard before they are judged. The extra moment spent listening often prevents the wrong conclusion from lasting much longer. Several officers quietly wrote those words into their notebooks before the discussion continued. Across the country, Justice Victoria Hayes continued serving on the Supreme Court with the same calm discipline that had guided every stage of her distinguished career. Oral arguments continued, constitutional questions demanded careful attention, and written opinions shaped the legal future of the nation. She never referred publicly to the supermarket incident because she believed institutions earned public confidence through improvement rather than personal recognition. Yet whenever law students or judicial interns asked what quality mattered most in public service, her answer remained remarkably consistent. Respect should never wait for recognition, she would say. Every person deserves fairness before anyone knows the title they carry. Those simple words quietly spread through legal education programs, judicial conferences, and mentoring conversations because they reflected principles far larger than one difficult morning. Several months later, the supermarket partnered with local law enforcement during a community appreciation event welcoming families, students, veterans, and neighborhood organizations. Employees offered store tours while officers answered questions about community safety and public service. Officer Ryan Walker volunteered throughout the afternoon, patiently helping elderly shoppers reach high shelves, guiding parents toward customer assistance, and personally walking a confused senior citizen to the correct pharmacy counter instead of simply pointing across the store. Nearby, Justice Victoria Hayes quietly observed the interaction while purchasing a few everyday groceries before another official commitment. She immediately recognized Ryan, but what caught her attention most was not his face. It was the patience in his voice, the respect in his posture, and the willingness to listen before speaking. She smiled gently before continuing toward the checkout lanes without interrupting the moment. She understood that meaningful change rarely announced itself through dramatic speeches or public ceremonies. It appeared quietly through ordinary decisions repeated every single day. As evening sunlight streamed through the supermarket windows and customers slowly completed their final purchases, shopping carts rolled peacefully toward the parking lot beneath a sky painted with warm shades of gold. Most people inside the store never realized that one ordinary Saturday months earlier had quietly transformed the way many public servants approached the people they were sworn to protect. They simply experienced courtesy, patience, professionalism, and quiet respect without knowing how carefully those values had been strengthened. Perhaps that was the greatest success of all. Justice had never depended upon extraordinary moments alone. It grew stronger every time someone chose understanding before certainty, fairness before assumption, and dignity before recognition, allowing trust to become the most valuable thing anyone could ever carry home. Another year quietly unfolded, and the lesson that had begun between the supermarket checkout lanes gradually became part of the community itself. Customers continued arriving every morning with shopping lists, busy schedules, and ordinary concerns that rarely revealed the deeper stories behind their lives. Parents hurried through the aisles after work, elderly neighbors compared prices on familiar shelves, and young employees greeted hundreds of strangers every day without knowing where those people had come from or what responsibilities they carried beyond the automatic doors. Officer Ryan Walker now understood that reality more clearly than ever before. Every patrol assignment became an opportunity to practice the lesson he had once learned the difficult way. He no longer measured success by how quickly situations were resolved. Instead, he judged each day by whether every person left feeling they had been treated with fairness and respect. Fellow officers quietly noticed the difference. Conversations that once might have become tense often ended with calm understanding because Ryan now listened before reaching conclusions. During one community policing workshop, a newly assigned officer asked him what had changed his perspective so completely. Ryan looked toward a neighborhood shopping center filled with families loading groceries into their vehicles before answering. People remember how they were treated long after they forget why they first met you. If we protect dignity first, public trust has room to grow. Those simple words gradually became part of the guidance shared with younger officers beginning their own careers. Across the country, Justice Victoria Hayes continued serving the Supreme Court with the same thoughtful discipline that had always defined her work. Constitutional questions continued arriving before the court, attorneys presented arguments, and written opinions shaped the legal future of the nation. Yet whenever she accepted invitations to speak with future lawyers, judges, or public servants, she always returned to one principle that never changed. The law cannot ask citizens to believe in fairness unless the people serving it practice fairness first, she would say. Her audiences often remained silent because the truth of those words required no dramatic explanation. Months later, the supermarket hosted another neighborhood appreciation event welcoming families, teachers, veterans, and community organizations. Local officers volunteered beside store employees to assist shoppers, answer questions, and support charitable food programs serving nearby neighborhoods. Officer Ryan Walker spent the afternoon helping customers reach items on high shelves, guiding elderly visitors toward customer assistance, and patiently explaining directions to first-time shoppers who had become confused inside the busy store. Across another aisle, Justice Victoria Hayes quietly noticed him assisting a young mother whose shopping cart had become difficult to maneuver while caring for two small children. Ryan calmly helped organize the groceries, walked beside her until she reached the checkout area, and wished her family a pleasant afternoon before returning to his duties. Justice Hayes smiled gently before continuing her own shopping without interrupting the moment. She understood immediately that genuine growth rarely announced itself through speeches or ceremonies. It revealed itself through ordinary decisions repeated with quiet consistency. As evening sunlight filtered through the supermarket windows and the final customers completed their purchases, the automatic doors continued opening and closing for people whose stories remained unknown to everyone around them. Most never realized that one ordinary Saturday had quietly changed the way an entire community experienced public service. They simply encountered patience, professionalism, humility, and respect without understanding how carefully those values had been strengthened. Perhaps that was the greatest measure of justice. Not recognition. Not applause. Simply the quiet decision, repeated every single day, to see the person before the assumption and to remember that every act of fairness begins long before anyone learns another person's name. As another season quietly arrived, the supermarket continued serving the community exactly as it always had. Shopping carts rolled steadily across polished floors, fresh produce filled brightly lit displays, checkout scanners echoed through the front registers, and neighbors greeted one another while completing ordinary errands that seemed far removed from the highest levels of public service. Most customers never imagined that one ordinary Saturday months earlier had quietly transformed the way many people inside that store understood fairness, responsibility, and respect. Store manager Daniel Cooper often reflected on the lesson whenever new employees joined the staff. During orientation, he reminded cashiers, supervisors, and customer service associates that every shopper deserved to feel welcomed before anyone knew their profession, background, or personal story. People remember how they are treated far longer than they remember what they purchased, he would say. Those simple words gradually became part of the culture shared throughout the store. Officer Ryan Walker continued serving the community with renewed humility. Every interaction now began with a respectful greeting before questions followed. He listened carefully before drawing conclusions, explained procedures patiently, and approached every situation with the understanding that appearances rarely revealed the whole truth. Fellow officers quietly noticed the difference. New recruits often accompanied him during community assignments because they appreciated the calm confidence that now came from observation instead of assumption. One afternoon, a young officer asked Ryan what had changed his understanding of public service so completely. Ryan looked toward the supermarket entrance where families, elderly neighbors, students, and workers entered carrying shopping lists before answering. Every person who walks through those doors deserves the chance to become more than my first impression. If I forget that, then I forget why I wear this badge. The young officer quietly nodded, carrying those words into every future assignment. Across the country, Justice Victoria Hayes continued serving on the Supreme Court with the same thoughtful discipline that had always defined her work. Constitutional questions continued reaching the court, written opinions shaped important legal decisions, and future generations of attorneys looked toward the bench for guidance. Yet whenever she accepted invitations to speak with law students or public servants, she consistently returned to one principle that never changed. Justice begins long before a courtroom, she would say. It begins with the quiet decision to recognize another person's humanity before deciding anything else. Her audiences often remained silent because they understood that those words reached beyond the legal profession into everyday life. Months later, the supermarket organized another community appreciation event supporting local charities, schools, and neighborhood organizations. Officer Ryan Walker volunteered throughout the afternoon, patiently assisting shoppers, answering questions, and helping an elderly customer safely carry groceries to a waiting vehicle after noticing the customer struggling alone. Nearby, Justice Victoria Hayes quietly observed the moment while purchasing a few ordinary household items before continuing her official schedule. She recognized Ryan immediately, but what she noticed most was not the badge he wore. It was the patience in his voice, the respect in his actions, and the willingness to serve without expecting recognition. She smiled gently before leaving the store without interrupting him. There was nothing left to teach because the lesson had already become visible through ordinary choices repeated every single day. As evening sunlight streamed through the supermarket windows and the final customers completed their purchases, the automatic doors continued opening for strangers whose stories remained unseen by everyone around them. Perhaps that was the greatest reminder of all. A shopping cart could never reveal a person's purpose. A business suit could never fully explain a life. A badge could represent responsibility, and a judicial robe could represent the highest court in the nation, but neither carried lasting meaning without character. In the end, true justice never needed an introduction. It simply appeared wherever ordinary people chose understanding before assumption, humility before certainty, and respect before recognition, allowing dignity to become the quiet legacy every community deserved. Another year quietly passed, and the neighborhood supermarket continued opening its doors before sunrise to welcome families beginning ordinary Saturdays. Shopping carts rolled across polished floors, children reached for breakfast cereal from colorful shelves, employees greeted familiar customers by name, and neighbors exchanged friendly conversations while selecting fresh produce for the week ahead. Nothing about the building suggested that one quiet morning had once become the setting for a lesson powerful enough to reshape the people entrusted with protecting the community around it. Officer Ryan Walker still patrolled the same neighborhood streets, yet those who worked beside him noticed that his approach had changed in ways no training manual could fully explain. He no longer believed experience alone justified quick conclusions. Every conversation began with respect before questions. Every decision waited for observation before judgment. Younger officers often asked why he spent additional time listening even during busy calls. Ryan would simply smile before answering, "The strongest decision is rarely the fastest one. It is the one built on understanding instead of assumption." Those quiet words gradually became part of the advice shared with every new officer beginning community patrol. Across the country, Justice Victoria Hayes continued serving the Supreme Court with the same thoughtful discipline that had defined her remarkable career long before anyone inside that supermarket recognized her name. Constitutional questions continued reaching the court, written opinions continued shaping the nation, and future generations of attorneys continued learning from her careful reasoning. Yet whenever she accepted invitations to speak with students, judges, or future public servants, she consistently returned to one simple principle. The law earns trust only when people believe they will be treated fairly before anyone knows who they are. Every audience remained silent after hearing those words because they understood that the lesson belonged not only to courtrooms, but to schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, airports, stores, and every place where strangers met one another each day. Months later, the supermarket once again hosted a community appreciation event supporting local charities and neighborhood organizations. Officer Ryan Walker volunteered throughout the afternoon, patiently helping elderly shoppers load groceries, answering children's questions about community safety, and personally assisting anyone who appeared uncertain or overwhelmed. Across another aisle, Justice Victoria Hayes quietly noticed him helping a young father whose toddler had wandered a few feet away while groceries were being unloaded. Ryan calmly reunited the child with the family, offered a reassuring smile, and quietly returned to helping other customers without expecting recognition or praise. Justice Hayes watched the moment for only a few seconds before continuing toward the checkout area with the same calm dignity she had carried from the beginning. She understood that the greatest victories of justice rarely appeared in headlines. They appeared in ordinary choices repeated faithfully over time. As evening sunlight streamed through the supermarket windows and the final customers completed their purchases, automatic doors continued opening for people whose names, professions, and responsibilities remained unknown to everyone around them. Yet every person entered carrying the same hope that they would be treated with fairness, courtesy, and respect. Perhaps that had always been the true purpose of justice. Not simply to decide what was right after something had gone wrong, but to inspire people to choose what was right before misunderstanding ever had the chance to grow. A badge represented responsibility. A judicial robe represented the highest court in the nation. But neither carried lasting meaning without the character of the person wearing it. Because in the end, true justice never needed to announce itself. It quietly revealed its strength every time someone chose humility before certainty, understanding before assumption, and respect before recognition, leaving behind a legacy that continued speaking long after every title had faded into history.